Aloha mai kako, mahalo nui, Dr. Kalehua Krug for joining us and bringing your aloha and presence and ike and ohana here with us. I wanted to start out just by sharing my deep aloha and appreciation for your work around Olelo, around advocacy, around education, and all the spaces that you uphold for our lahui around uhi and around traditional and customary practice, helping us in our way and the ko'a, really pivotal roles of leadership, for our community. And so it's an honor and a privilege to have you join us. Today we talk about kapu, and the ohana and I guess our thoughts and relationships to it. But maybe the first one, if I can ask Olua, just to kind of vehe mai, owai oi, no hea mai oi, pelaku.
For me, I'll introduce that my ohana is of the Duvashell clan, stretching back to Ke Ka'alau Niu and Akavelau. That's where our family comes from, and from Molokai moved to Liliha and homestead on Nanakuli with my great-grandfather and my grandmother. And my mother was raised in Nanakuli, and they moved over to Kalihi, where later in her life, where I was raised between Kalihi and Nanakuli, but I do find the Mokoa and I as my home. And that's where we live now in Lulualei.
Aloha nui kako, o Kamaleikuhalia. See my camp from Waianae, from Lulualei, Waianae. Between the beautiful mahoes, ma'ili ili lau o Pahe'ehe'e. Ohana's from Molokai too. I'm a graduate of Kekulakai Puni o Anuinui. Now a kumu at Kawaihono Kana'awao. So education has always been a part of our ohana, and that's just my kuleana, just to revitalize Olelo and Ike Kupuna. And we'll get more about that after Aka. Aloha nui kako.
Aloha.
Mahalo. Aloha. And at our small nonprofit, Aloha Kumo Aina, trying to uplift Aloha Aina and this mo'olelo of the Battle of Kuomo'o and dig deeper to understand, what are those illuminations that can kind of guide us for today as a lahui and as a people. And so with this particular series, thinking about kapu, hui kalamaya, I don't understand kapu entirely. I've learned it through books and through some cultural practice. A big part of this series is understanding, our collective mana'o around it and sharing stories. So, you folks are involved in so many things, but maybe starting from your mana'o, what is kapu to you? And can you describe what your relationship is into this concept, kapu?
I'm probably in the same boat as you. When it comes to describing what kapu is, I think kapu becomes a way of being, and it's something that is understood over time and through practice, especially in the current society that we live in, because we're not actually formally walked through educational experiences as youth to be able to better understand what the idea of kapu is. For myself, I'll say it's times of focus, it's times of significance, it's times of sanctity and value. For myself, that's what I promote as an educator, as a principal now at Kawaihono Kana'awa Public Charter School in Nanakuli. Kapu to me is like going into the deep ocean. And that feeling that exists there is kapu. The fear and the care that we put into raising our children, the dire need to survive is kapu. Climbing into the cliffs and to the heights of our mountaintops. That feeling inside is what drives kapu to me. And I think that's the best way that I can describe it. But I also know that many folks enter into these spaces of ihi ihi and kapu kapu to generate not only that feeling inside, but also the subsequent spiritual outcomes that for our beliefs and practices arise out of events and those experiences. So I would define it like that. And I think I engage in it in many different ways that we can talk about in a little bit, but let Kamale kind of.
Just backing off of what he said about kapu, thinking about how I grew up and how I guess kapu was introduced, or how kapu played a big role in my life. But I remember as a kid going up to Ka'ala, going to Ka'ena and those type of places where you know that there's a presence around you, thinking about ho'omana, that kind of stuff. I know going up in Ka'ala into the Wawakua as a kid, that made me, I guess that humbled me and showed me that there's just things that are more important than just us, and it's our kuleana as people to take care of those things, and that's the kapu and the pilina that we have with the aina, the kai, as what you're saying.
There's the idea for me, and it's taken me a long time to get to this explanation, but there's the idea that our ancestors ran an experiment for a couple of thousand of years, and trying to use English and describe it in the context today, that they ran a study, a longitudinal study, and they were the researchers. And then the culture that they built, the societies that they built, the behaviors and values and practices that they employed, that was the derivative of data. So that after all of that data collection, that their synthesis and analysis in the end was basically our culture. And that our culture did something, that it showed that something was more important to them than other things we might hold as important now. An example of that being that there's like the idea of the heli ika aina he kaua ke kanaka, that's ideological, that the aina is more important than us, that we can still be important, but there's still a hierarchy, and that the well-being of aina was at the pinnacle of that hierarchy, and that actually they could understand better that when the aina's well-being is taken care of, it's easier for us to take care of our well-being. When you flip that paradigm and we centralize ourselves as what's most important, that not only do we begin to kind of become egotistical and narcissistic, but we forget about the aina, and then that's the double whammy on humanity and all the other things that our ecological brothers and sisters take cracks too because of our actions. And I think we kind of live in a world now that is all Noah, that anything is under the auspices and understandings of this desire for individual autonomy and freedom, and not realizing our role in the ecosystem, spiritual ecosystems too, and in our communities and in general. So the actual consequence of the Battle of Kuamo'o is much, much more significant than I think most people give it credibility. And I think it just boils down to not knowing our history, not really spending time studying the positive side to our ways, to the idea of kapu. So mahalo for this inquiry.
Mahalo. I think that's part of, like you say, heli ka aina. Like that's a refrain that expresses our relationship to aina and who we serve and why we serve. Thinking about that, if heli ka aina, it makes sense that ai is kapu, right? Because what comes from the aina is what feeds us materially, spiritually, and then what we consume, what we put into our bodies, how we conduct ourselves around those akua that you talked about, Kamale on the Mauna and other places, is all a part of what goes in, and goes out. And understanding you're not going to get that in a little archaeological blurb when they just talk about separating men and women and, can I eat pig? These real surface levels of kind of thinking about what that whole structure was around. Is kapu important, do you think, for our lives today and for the lahui? Like what are the benefits of us exploring, exercising, cultivating kapu?
I think for me, yes, kapu is important. It's important because what we see as kapu shapes our actions. When one, like what he was talking about, heli ika aina he kaua ke kanaka, when you see the aina as a kua, when you see it as something that has value as kapu, you start to care for it as if it had that value. So thinking about what's happening with the vai now, the vai is kane in the Hawaiian culture. And when you see the vai as an akua, you care for it as an akua. You don't pollute it. You don't do that kind of stuff to it. And so seeing kapu, or knowing that there is kapu in things around us and the aina and everything that we live around, that shapes how you care for it and how you act and how you live. Because thinking about how your actions affect the environment around you, that's how you know that something is kapu, is when you care. Like, when you walking on the street, you see opala in the ocean, you're like, you pick it up, you take care of it, because that's kind of law. You don't just walk by and not care, because when you see the ocean as an akua, you care for it as an akua. I think he can explain about that more better.
No, the earth taught us kapu. Everything that comes out of our culture comes from observing the earth, and the earth has kapu. It has laws, it has rules, and all we got to do is observe and follow them. And so by choosing to live in a cultural way, kapu is inherent, like we talked about in the deep ocean and the upland mountains. And those spaces of sanctity are created because it's not just it's our relationship internally to the external environment. And so when we walk there, children naturally feel that. Humans naturally feel that, and that's the basis for that kapu. But we choose that, in life. It's a daily part of our existence. It's inherent to life itself.
That is powerful, man. I think about, like you said, the stories we live by, whether it's man's dominion over the earth, or Heli Ikaina, and how we view ourselves and our relationships become the result of those stories, right? I can see it, your imagery of being in that deep ocean and the kapu that's there, and our kapu is being developed around our relationships and observations of Papa, of the earth, of Wakea, of Kane, right? And all these beings that we so-called deified, these natural systems around us, and being in that intimate relationship with them. And what a powerful way of thinking about, like you said, humans drive to build relationships. Yeah, I mean, that's I think a fundamental challenge of these kind of modern industrial societies, is when people's relationships break down with place, with each other.
Real quick, because I think you brought up like the gender roles, and I think that's something in this conversation, because that's actually something that we try to do when it's time to make imu. Me and Kaula, my son, we go make imu. When it's time to weave or kuku kapa, the wahine take that on. In the times of ceremony for wahine, the male role is guided by the wahine. And in a time of kakao, you build this place for males to feel valued and to have responsibility. You build a place for females to have autonomy, to have decision making power, to fulfill these roles. To me, is just a reflection of that relationship to nature, is that there's duality in nature. I think the way the society was constructed is to dismantle the idea that you are okay alone. And I think the construct is beautiful. No child and no human situates themselves in their existence feeling like they should or have to go at it alone. That it's built into society that the kauhale is there to take care of everyone, that the generations are taken care of, that each gender role group has a kuleana to fulfill for the entirety, for the one, the collective. Speaking to it in that way, for me, clarifies my responsibility of kapu, as the borderland between two individuals is kapu, because there's a kuleana in that space, and that's built through the relationship.
I think you pretty much said it about the kuleana of the wahine and the kuleana of the kane. It strengthens my relationship, especially like me and my sister with my brother, because we know that for some things that we look to him, to Alakai, and for some of the things for him, he looks to me and Lele. And that's just, he talked about the kaiahulu and I know when we have our ohana, it's not going to just be like my sons and then like his kids. It's going to be that the kuleanas and the kuleana of raising each other's keiki is going to be on each other, because Kaula has that kuleana that me and Lele don't have, as far as kaukahoimu, kakao, kikui'ai, that kind of stuff. And then me and Lele with the kapala, the kuku kapa, the hanalohala. And just going off of some of the things that shaped the way I viewed my kuleana as a wahine really goes down and just starts at that the ahawai makalehua, with the first menstrual cycle. And I think that's just like, that created the foundation for me growing up, because knowing that going through the you have to know your kuleana as a wahine. And through our there was a section in the ceremony where we had to like make a promise to all of the wahine that was at the So we invited a bunch of women who we thought were role models, and like my kumuhula, some of my kumus growing up at Anoinue, and family members that we looked up to, and just going through that process of going through the and just standing up in front of them and making that promise that I'll uphold the kuleana of a wahine, and just acknowledging all of the akua wahine that set the foundation for what it is to be a wahine and a kuleana of a wahine. I think the is what kind of grounded me. And growing up, I always knew that this was my job. I was born to do this. I was born to be a wahine and to hapai the kuleana and to take care of my ohana that way. So yeah, I think just starting at the that's what kind of set me off to knowing my kuleana in this world. And just in my ohana, and how to take care of it, and how to malama my ohana in the way that I can as a wahine.
How would you say, for someone out there, how do you think someone would cultivate an understanding and appreciation, for kapu, if you never grew up with it?
The folks now, we're always making excuses, and I say that, I'm going to point right at whoever is listening. It's like we make these excuses. Oh, well, life isn't that simple. when the reality is, not realizing that, reality is a construct of us, that reality has been and will always be malleable. We've moved from a place, like we've told ourselves the story that we don't need to know too much history anymore. We don't need to monitor our genealogy. We don't need to know our traditions or our stories, that history in and of itself is not really that important. The most important thing is looking forward and progress. When we moved away from valuing kupuna, their knowledge, their stories, the movement away from memorized sources of information, and placing the carriers, the people, the actual vessel of that information is just as important as the information itself. That, and we could record history in books. The book becomes valuable, not the lap of our kupuna, not sitting at the foot of our elders. And so, I think for myself, it's really gone back to this idea that really don't look back, because if you look back, your test scores are going to drop. If you look back too far, you're not going to get on good job. You're not going to have one house. And that's all a part of the story we're enacting. We've been told this. I'm trying to say this really cautiously, because it's more about, we cannot have educational institutions that are built upon the concept of critical thought, yet not possess the capacity of critical thought to dismantle our own blind spots. Because I think when it comes to the idea of Christianity, it's taught to our people, it was taught to me in a way that even if things don't make sense, just close your eyes and keep believing. And when you're believing another story, you're actually spending, in the 100% of your time that you have to do what you do, you're spending a lot of that time busying yourself reading the story. You're spending a lot of that time looking at that story to guide your life. And the story is actually constructed so that you don't look at other stories. And I think it's fundamentally a flawed existence. What I would ask those folks to do, take a step back if you can, because most people cannot. Just look at, how are humans interacting? And then, how were humans interacting? How does the environment look now? How is our access to clean water? How is our access to land and to food? How are our relationships with the other species around us? What are the actual ethical connections that we have to them? Past 10,000 years ago, the earth was actually doing well. The data says that that was better. 100%. I agree with that was better, because I'm not just thinking about myself. I'm thinking about everything in the environment, the ecological system. And right now, our planet is hurting. All of the things that we've done and moved away from understanding where the kupuna were trying to take us has been to the detriment not only of the planet, but to our internal psychological well-being. And I'll say our physical well-being, because of the food that we eat and the things in the air that we breathe and the things in the water now that we drink. The data is clear. We just got to be able to take a step back from the stories that guide our actions and our behaviors and really be a critical thinker.
I can see how, thinking about those monotheistic religions and thinking about the multitude of practices and places of akua, that we had at the lap of your kupuna, in the alo ali'i, in the wawakua, getting one la'au out of the forest, falling a tree. Every action and activity had a kahea, had a relationship, had mana that we could see in those things before we took, before we consumed, before we entered. There's a awesome passage that sometimes we use in our classes. Kamakau talks about people planting uala, these great big fields in acres, and he talks about everybody getting dressed up in their ahu and putting on fancy clothes and lei, and the wahine taking part in aspects, the kane putting in the o'o, and then wahine put in all the slips, and it's like the whole thing is like a dance, and then everybody, celebrates and eats together. Or when open up awai, and Nakuina talks about they open the awai, but before, make one imu, make ceremony, celebrate imu in the awai, and everybody consuming together. And then you contrast that with sacredness is in this building on Sunday, and you can be forgiven, you can repent, you can do all these things if you just come on this day, and you're right. And the outcomes of those behaviors over time drastically different relationships with what we consume and the aina and what we value, the realities that we construct. In many ways, those stories that we tell are almost an unconscious, that's cultural frameworks around us of imperialism and the occupation and so on and so forth kind of impose them on us. But if you step back, like you said, and think about the health of the aina and what's around us, maybe we can see, maybe we can listen.
How Kamali was saying, I think that's a construct that when kane equals water, you treat it differently. You treat it well. If you can treat water, or if you hold it in the same esteem as that you can hold whatever God you believe in, I think we'll be okay. And you can label it however you want, but you gotta behave in that way. And I think that that's a more important derivative of those processes than actually arguing in the weeds of no. I'm praying to Kane. I'm praying to God. I pray to Kane. I pray to God, and you argue in the weeds. And that's not the point. The point is you need to behave in that way.
That's powerful. And the behavior, the outcome, the practice, the relationship, the value, the care, that comes out of it is what is important, is what is different. And I really also what you said, thinking about, how do we translate akua and these multitude ways? And maybe, what I heard you say is maybe it's more important to think of akua in relationship with makua and the aspects of caring and the values and practices and the worldview that's associated with just the construct of these words, so we don't get lost in, one God, or akua means deity, akua means natural system, whatever. But akua and makua, why? What's
Now we just take on a lot of criticism throughout the years doing what we do, and hearing like, oh well, oh, you're talking to the rocks and you're talking to the sticks. Well, if you go back to the old ways, Kamale not gonna be able to eat pig, or you cannot eat certain bananas. You want to go do that? It's just the way it dismisses not just the inherent value of all native cultures, but it dismisses the evil that exists in this world. And that to me as a part is like, nah, you guys, you cannot. You're just trying for oversimplify a really complex issue, and it serves that purpose. It serves that purpose to dismantle your ability to think critically, because at the core of all of these belief structures is that think critically up until a point. And I think that's what government wants. That's I would say that's what the Catholic Church wanted in medieval times. That's what was taking place, in the institutions of colonial Europe as they set out on manifest destiny. And those are just constructs of a way of being. And to me, it's just hard for me to play into that hand. I know what cards they're holding. I'm not going to play into the hand, but many of us play into the hand.
Mahalo for being so open and sharing. And I hadn't really thought about the struggles that your ohana and you folks face in that ho'okele that you kind of set out for your family and your place. And
but I tell you, people like fight, and I'm not going to fight over this. Just using the words that I'm sharing with you right now, people like fight, or less words. Like I don't even get this far. And it's coming off of questions, honest, bro. It's coming off of questions like, bro, what is that on your face? Or what you doing for Jesus? And people just come out of there, walk right up to me and ask me. And I'm like, I don't know. Oh, you're going hell. You're going hell in school. Someone told her she's going hell. And she's like, what is that hell? Not realizing that if you're not taught it, it doesn't exist. Sorry.
Bro, you almost going to bring up one that reminds me. Second grade, my mom was trying her best, but she sent me to this Christian school long time ago. And, there was a kind like, accept Jesus as your savior. And so they're giving us this whole talk. And I remembered, my tutu telling us about the Battle of Komo'o and, our ohana's sort of involvement in these different things. And so immediately in my head, I went to like, okay, so if I don't accept Jesus, I go in hell. Okay. And then I was thinking about, but what about my kupuna that fought for these things? And so I raised my hand. You know what? What if, your kupuna or your ancestors never knew about Jesus? Are they still going to hell? Yes, anybody, that didn't accept Jesus as their savior, if they didn't know about him, it's because they were never meant to know about him. So they're already in hell. And I go, that's stupid.
I mean,
And then,
that's true. Because I ended up in the same space, not having Ohana in that battle, but just more like if my kupuna coming from Molokai, believing in what they did, doing what they did, are in hell, I go into them
mm,
with honor. I'm not going to choose and pearls and gold and white glimmering castles and gates and stuff. Honest, I mean that's it sounds too much like human wealth.
mm, mm,
Kahe'e hauna vela. I'm born of
mm.
fire.
If you don't mind sharing your role and Kapu's role in creating the koa and creating that whole place and ceremony and activity for us to rejuvenate our way. And I mean, coming at a time where, we didn't know how to strategize the movement around what the Navy, had done, and how to galvanize our people and our place, and thinking about Kapu and the koa and your activities there.
I mean, ultimately, the wai should have been kapu. I mean, and we've got to draw attention to that. Since leaving the ideas or the constructs that upheld the concept of kapu, we've done nothing but destroy all that is sacred. And we've destroyed the idea of sacred in a naturalistic sense. And so when it comes to that, it's like, I always use this idea of advocacy. I don't want to label it like this because it's always presented to me in that way, but activism. But that to me is like la'au lapa'au. It's like medicine for me. And so whenever things happen that consciously and subconsciously are really, really bad, like these are major atrocities happening right in front of our face, that I'm gonna go bed, I'm gonna wake up, I'm gonna go back work tomorrow, and these are atrocities just taking place right in front of us, and there's nothing I can do about it because I don't know how to remove fuel from a slushy aquifer, and so there's only one way in that space to deal with that. And some people are gonna go to the halepule, they're gonna go to church, and they're gonna pray, and that's a natural reaction when you feel helpless. And so I think in that space of recognizing the sanctity and kapu that should exist in water, and then feeling the shame of not having the power to not only do anything about what happened, but not to even be conscious of it throughout my life in enough of a way to do anything about it. That you built a koa because our culture believes that water is sacred. So you go to a place where you know that, like you go into an ideological way of being. When you build a koa, you actually try to attract things. And traditionally it's get one on Mo'ula Nui on Kaho'olawe for rain. They Anakala Eri Ka'anana used to talk about building them in the ocean for a opelu and all of the pua'i'a that go inside and protect themselves from larger fish in the koa. And so the idea of protection and the idea of wellness and the idea of thrive and the idea of drawing resources, when you do that, it actually helps to heal. It helps to regenerate my ability to continue to move forward in advocacy. When you learn these things, you yourself become a better human. You gain knowledge on how to think about taking care of your world, taking care of each other, interacting with everything in the ecological systems. And so it reminds you of your relationships. And so you by doing these things, by building a koa, by learning olelo, by being a teacher, these are all points of advocacy that people watch, I think, us walk through. But it's just as healing for me or us to do something, because it's going to be worse if I don't.
Wow, bro. Appreciate you folks and the spaces that we are able to stand together, and so deeply proud of just being Kanaka. And I think recognizing that Kapu is still alive in so many ways for our people. What you folks are sharing with us really reminding me just how much it's available for us, and how strong it can make us as a people and Ohana. you know.
Oh, mahalo for your
Yeah.
family, bro, for defending that battlefield, bro.
Mm,
Hey, I tell you, the battle may have been lost, but the war rages on. I'm gonna tell you, and
mm,
it's a
mm,
war of ideology, bro,
mm.
and we gotta win them.
Yeah, it's you know, and it's amazing the ways technology or that other worldview wants to solve, that we can sort of technocrat our way out of the crisis without ever, like you said, taking a step back and actually looking at our worldview and our relationships and the health of the things that are around us, not just people. Um, or yeah, okay, guys going Mars. Good luck with that. Who's going Mars?
Yeah, I don't tell you though, but I find hope that if you ask a 5-year-old, should we displace this family of Puel to build a new subdivision for us? To them, easy, you know the answer.
Hmm.
What? No. Why would you even consider that? It's just the indoctrinated, delusional adult that says, "Oh, it's not that simple." But I think it
Yeah.
is.
Mm. Mm.